live.
Uh-oh. Not even my dulcet tones.
Oh, I think we're good now.
Now can you hear my dulcet tones?
Okay, we're good. Okay, I'm going to start over. Welcome, everyone, to tonight's stream. I'm Chase. Tonight we have Danny and Laura and Walter with us. We're going to talk about building better baddies. We're gonna dive into what makes bad guys good, maybe? I don't know. I'm sorry. Danny, quick, who are you? What are we doing?
Who even are you?
Who?
Yeah, who even are you?
I?
Again.
How'd you get
am
into
I?
the Vorpal board?
This is the question of the ages. I mean, it's a question we all ask, both ourselves and others. So yeah, I'm Danny Oliver. You know, storyteller, game master. Work for Catalyst Game Labs as one of their writers, and for developing the Shadowrun Missions Living campaign with them. Also, I work with Rem Alternus as the content manager, and also GMing some of the live streams over there, including the new Shadowrun Missions live stream where we're doing the Chicago arc. That's on Tuesday nights. You can catch it on Rem Alternus, and also we're gearing up for a Dungeons and Dragons live stream on Sunday nights, like clockwork, based in a world of my own creation.
Nice.
That also has an accompanying graphic novel that we should be releasing at the beginning of the next year.
Awesome,
That's me.
Awesome. Laura, introduce yourself a little bit.
Hi, my name is Laura Croston, and I am a GM. I work a lot with tabletop. I'm also a writer, and I do some instructional design and other business communication projects for boring day job type nonsense. I have been gaming since I was about 7 years old with my dad, and have since moved on to running games, which is more fun because you get to be more bossy pants kind of stuff, right? You're in charge of stuff, which seems, you know, to appeal to some level of my personality. But yeah, I come to the whole GMing and sort of game creation thing from a writing standpoint first. I'm a creative writer, and that is where I approach things from.
Awesome. Glad to have you, Walter. A little bit about yourself.
I'm Walter Stewart. I am the general manager at Tabletop Game and Hobby, what I consider the premier game store in Kansas City. We have been in business 26 years. I've been manager for 10. I have been playing and running games for about 30 years now, and probably the maturity level has circled right back around to 11.
Yeah.
Started at 11, I got a little sophisticated, and then now right back down to about 12-year-old maturity. So
perfect.
I'm just glad to hear you went through some kind of maturity thing, because I didn't. I admire that.
I was insufferable in high school and college. Walter was the worst. It was only very serious games.
Okay.
Yes. Now it's right back to immaturity. So.
Well, thanks everyone for joining. I think at some point, maybe in the future, we'll just start skipping that, because everyone should know who we are. We have a regular crew, but we'll see how it goes. All right, we're gonna get into it tonight. We're building better baddies tonight, guys. If you're in the chat, you got questions, let us know. We're open to anything, but specifically, we have a prepared list of questions that we're gonna run through. But the conversation kind of picks up. Chat, if you have any questions about anything GM related, we'll answer those. But you know, we'll be specifically focusing on the building the better baddies part. So let's get into it. First question, Walter, we'll let you start.
Oh God,
is it true? I guess you guys can discuss this. Is it true that every story needs a villain?
So, no. Every story needs conflict. If you don't have conflict, stories aren't very interesting. You don't have a lot going on, and if the players are just accomplishing everything and there's no one in their way, it's not very exciting. I guess satisfying in a Farmville-esque everything's fine sense, but not for games. But those conflicts don't have to be between like villains. You need people or forces that are opposed to your characters in some way. Obviously, generally, it's easy to have a big bad guy who hates you and wants to ruin your whole day. But it can be there's a huge amount of things. That's what we're going to talk about, I think, a lot tonight, is that there's a vast amount of area where you can have anti-heroes or just antagonists or forces of nature or anything that you can put in front of your players to make them suck. So,
or give them conflict, like you said, or else it's boring.
No, that's what I meant. Give them conflict.
Yeah, conflict. Yeah. We don't want them to have the like. I like the analogy, the Farmville analogy. Okay, check that achievement. Check that achievement. Killed 20 goblins today. Got it. No big deal. Laura, what are your thoughts on that?
So for me, I think that Walter pretty much hit it on the head what my feelings are, which is that you don't necessarily need a villain, because a villain by definition presupposes that it is this evil, bad, negative influence. And what you need is an antagonist. You need something that is a foil for the story. There has to be sort of the person who is the one main actor, the protagonist, and the antagonist is the person who's working against that other person, hence the name and the words. But that doesn't mean that it has to be a bad person. There are plenty of good bad guys who aren't necessarily bad, and that you find yourself, like the best ones I think are the ones where you look at and say, gosh, dang it, I can actually see where this guy is coming from. Right? So it's just somebody who's working against that. And everybody is the hero of their own story. So no bad guy should ever think of himself or herself as a villain. Right? They think of themselves as the hero of their story. So yeah, just somebody who's
right. Yeah, they're doing it for their reasons.
Yeah. I wish I would have used the word foil. I really wish I would have. Oh well.
Yeah, I got to it first. Sorry, man. That's
real good. Well done.
So this is a binary question, and we have 3 people answering. So I'm just gonna be like, yes, you must have a villain. The villain is the one who goes against the grain and tells everyone else they're wrong.
Ooh.
So you're the villain of this story.
There it is.
What I'm.
In this story right now, I'm the villain.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, well done. That was
just
empirical evidence, is what that was. That was nice.
Yeah. Yes.
Danny's causing the conflict to this evening.
It's proof. Yeah. It's proof. The easiest way, I mean, it's just the simplest way, right, to set up a conflict is to just have some actual, clearly identified thing that is opposed to the aims of whoever our good guys are, aka protagonists. So yeah, it's that's kind of easiest thing to see, and it often, I think probably 90% of stories that involve any sort of action, it's going to generally be a villain. But yeah, and in role-playing games, since role-playing games generally touch on action, again, we're often going to see a villain. But yeah, you don't need to have it be a villain. It can be, like the other said, it can be just some sort of other conflict, man versus nature, or versus your own inner whatever. But the other kind of question is what we talked about. Everyone's the hero in their own story. So then, what is a villain, right? What actually is a villain? So the player characters could be villains, really. So.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. So I think the overarching answer to that is no. Every story doesn't have a villain, but there should be conflict to make it interesting. Isn't the GM a villain? Stainless Steel Devil Rat says.
When you are the DM.
Yeah, maybe not. It depends on their mood that day. Oh man, yeah. We had some people in the chat. They said man versus nature. It could be really boring. Or I think we're going to get into that one if it's not done right. It said if it's not done right. If it's not done right, is the clarification.
I have opinions, so
player characters versus themselves. Oh, and then pets. Conflict with pets. Oh, there's always fun stuff that comes because the pet's in danger. Oh no, we care about.
With any luck, the pet is in danger. So yeah.
Oh my. Pretty sure, Reverend's sure that all of his players are always villains. Well, is that one of your guys, Danny? Reverend's?
Yeah, it's a friend of mine. In fact,
nice.
Yeah, we should talk offline with him later.
Yeah.
Okay. That's cryptic.
Okay,
great. All right.
Later. It comes later. Okay, let's move on to the next question. This is just a little bit to get to know you guys a little bit better. Who are some of your favorite fictional antagonists and least? Let's give one of each. Let's give a favorite and then a least favorite fictional antagonist. Who wants to start with that?
Well, I'll start, but first I want to thank. It looked like Rappel just started following us, so thank you, Rappel, for the follow.
Oh, thank
some
you.
of my favorite villains. I don't know if you guys are video game players. This just came up earlier when I was talking with some other friends. But Handsome Jack from the Borderlands series is right up there on my favorite list because he's the guy. He is totally the hero of his own story. He announces it. He narrates the fact, right? He's basically also the narrator of his own story. And on top of that, you see at varying points the humanity and the stuff come through. We're like, oh my god, he's the worst person in the entire universe. But unfortunately, I see where he's coming from. I get it, right? So yeah, he is one of my favorites. Does anybody else have one? I mean, I could go on forever. So somebody else throw in before I keep talking.
One, I mean, I'm gonna go because comic books things I think provide such wonderful just spikes on head villains for things. But one of my favorites, I mean, I love Thanos in the new Avengers things, just because again, you get a villain, and I mean, his plan's pants on head crazy, but he has such he really believes it's like, no, he is doing the right thing with this insane plan that's just ridiculous and comic booky, but damn it, he is there for it, and you are not going to convince him that he is not doing the right thing at every step of the way, and that makes him a lot more interesting than someone that's just like, orphanage, fire, yay, that kind of stuff. So,
puppies, I think Cruella de Vil is like the perfect sort of like the cartoon.
Yeah,
it's like
no,
death to puppies. Oh god.
Gonna take the controversial dead puppy stance. Yeah, it's weird. So I want villains that believe they're doing the right thing, and ideally villains that are a little more shades of gray on what they're doing than Thanos, because Thanos, it's like, no, you're not, you're really not. But that sort of idea where they firmly believe it and can sort of at least ostensibly back up what they're saying.
Yeah, I mean, when they jump in and they're just like, you start with the conflict and then they give their reasons and you're like, oh man, do I want to punch you in the face or?
Yeah, where do I sign his contract? Does he have does this villain offer insurance? Because I'm thinking it just
benefits.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully. I mean, he would only offer them to half his employees, but
yeah, insurance costs money. My favorite villains are mostly just villains who aren't necessarily set up to be villains, or just there's just something in the story that just turns them towards villainy or makes them the villain. But again, it really has to do with that sort of depth of character. So like Raistlin from the Dragonlance Chronicles, right? So his twin brother is literally the hero, and they're together, and he wants things, and those things propel him to become a villain. But you still see that he has that he cares about people and individuals, and he has certain moments. But then and when he turns on those, when he actually the villainy comes through, it's just that much more of a gut punch when that happens. So that my other favorite villain for most recently is just because of the portrayal of the character, and that is Vincent D'Onofrio's Wilson Fisk from Daredevil.
No, that is so good. Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, that performance just that is now Kingpin for me forever.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So
I would also add, my background is literature, and from a classical literature standpoint, I love Javert in Les Miserables, because he's absolutely an antagonist. No way can you really say he's a villain, right? Because he's at all points trying to do the right thing. He is the law. He's following the law, and what's happening is that he is unable to see the shades of gray. So he doesn't have those shades of gray exactly. In fact, that's his problem, is that right and wrong are very clearly defined for him, and he can't imagine a good person also being a criminal. And so for me, that's one of the greatest villains of all time, or greatest antagonists of all time, is this guy who is a good guy, but he's doing stuff that just isn't right, in spite of the fact that he is doing the law.
Absolutely. Guys, wow. Yeah, Kingpin. That was a good one, and I like the Les Miserables one.
Well, and then on the opposite side of it, I know I was just saying how I want sophisticated villains that have nuanced reasons for what they do wrong. But also, if you've ever read the novel Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, his villains, Krupp and Vandemar, that are just hilarious scenery chewing villains. They're like vaudevillian villains. Like, I mean, they just love doing evil things, like literally for the sake of being super evil, and they are real satisfied. But I think to do that, you have to be absurdly charismatic. You have to be written by Neil Gaiman to get away with that kind of thing. But they're just so suave about how they're complete dicks.
Yeah.
So,
honestly, I feel that that's a bit of a trope. I mean, you see that sort of like not necessarily in all the cases are they necessarily the main villain. A lot of times, like maybe they're like henchmen for some villain, but it's like it'll be a pair, and there'll be some sort of dynamic between them that's really fun. And there's this again charisma. Like talking about those two, and then recently brought to mind is the two villains from the Umbrella Academy season 1, Mary J. Blige's character. And I'm trying to remember their names, but that's the same sort of thing where they come in, they're really oddball characters, you know, and they have a job to do, you know, nothing personal, man. That's just the job, but also I kind of enjoy the job, you know, sort of thing. So yeah, it's I do enjoy that trope.
Yeah, we're getting some feedback in the chat as well. We got Daenerys Targaryen as a favorite villain from Stainless Steel Devil Rat because let's see, sympathetic villains are scary, and then it just kind of starts and seems like a protagonist at first, and I think that's one of the and then we got a Doc Ock by Alfred Molina.
Right,
that was Spider-Man 2, right? The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 2 Doc Ock.
Yeah.
Sad villains are real good. I like that whenever they do a real good Mr. Freeze, you know, he just wants to get his wife back, and he'll murder an entire city full of people to do this. But like whenever he talks about his wife, you're like, oh, single tear. Maybe it's okay that he like froze an entire bank full of people. But you feel bad for him because, you know, he's a sweet guy, except for the aforementioned murder.
The freezing and the murder.
All the freezes.
Right.
Conversely, Mr. Freeze, as played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, is probably one of the worst villains.
Right.
Hey, yeah.
Give him for anything. That
guy,
yeah,
let's get into the worst villains. Go for it.
God damn it.
The worst villain of all time. The worst villain of all time. And he's bad because not only is the character itself bad, but it also highlights what's bad about the universe that he's in. And this character is, I don't care that I butcher his name, whatever, that guy, right? You know who I'm talking about? He's
Did you
Mr.
hear my
Mixel.
eyes rolling from
so he's just like this guy that comes in as just like antics, right? Like, what is he doing? Nobody knows. Who cares? And the only way to defeat him is to trick him into saying his own name backwards. Like, you can't do it. Like, you have to trick him into saying it. And it's not like some name like, you know, where it's just easily flipped around and it says something. No, the reverse of his name is like more nonsense, right? So how do you get him to say that? And it just, to me, it represents all that's shitty about DC Comics. And I said it. Superman is the worst character ever written. The ultimate Mary Sue fan fulfillment. Nothing hurt him until they finally just have to make up just ridiculous stuff like say this guy's name backwards. Worst villain.
Okay, so are the rest of us allowed to have any opinions, or has Danny just spoken all there is about it? And
that's the one. It's worst villain. You can have second. You can argue over second worst villain.
Right, we've established the worst, and we're fighting for second at this point.
That's right.
Okay. I am gonna say something that I think is probably gonna be hated by many, but I don't love the villainy of the majority of Star Wars. I feel like that the antagonism there, I feel like they're very one-dimensional. They're very cookie-cutter. They're very mustache-twirling. I mean, you know, you look at any of the emperors, and they're all just sort of these cookie-cutter. No, look, I'm going to twirl my mustache. Look how evil I am. Wah! It's, for Christ's sake, no, come on, give me something more than I want to do. You know, just, and I mean the movie specifically. I understand that the extended universe has more stuff, and there are things I love about it, and they're
yes,
but.
I'm glad you cut me off before I had. Well, if you.
and there he went.
Oh, you
Look,
got froze. You froze,
froze.
Walter. Oh no.
wow. Perfect
Can we get
timing.
a,
Someone
get a screenshot
of that. Yeah.
Yeah, screenshot
All
that
right.
real quick.
Actually,
I need you to.
Oh,
no.
He froze up from Vorpal too. Actually. Oh, he went away.
Oh, he's
It's
gone.
okay, give him a second.
I got
Yep.
So
I got the
So,
screenshot
Danny,
right
you
before
continue.
though.
It's all right. We'll get him back here.
I was gonna say that apparently the universe agrees with you, Laura, because it brooks no insult to that opinion. Yeah, no, I sort of agree. I mean, like Star Wars, right? Like how for our generation, it is the quintessential sort of Western, right? I called it the quintessential Western. Star Wars for our generation.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, I got apparently
good.
so enraged it kicked me off.
The internet.
of the Vorpal.
There was a great disturbance in the internet and
In the yeah.
It rage
They were
quit
waiting.
for you.
I could not.
Yes.
We did not have bandwidth for the amount of sad fanboy that I want. It's actually in the extended universe.
I know,
You're
man.
right. It just there was too much.
Yeah.
But
going in.
yeah, for our generation, I mean, it's literally the good, the bad, and the edgelord, right? Like you've got like this guy with the helmet, and it was so cool, and then Return of the Jedi with the Red Crimson Guard, and I mean that stuff is Boba Fett with his Mandalorian, like we still idolize that today.
I give you Boba Fett's a good villain though, right? That's fine. I give you Boba Fett.
And Tarkin's all like, "Bitch, I blew up your planet."
And we got Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Yeah.
That's an extended universe. We're not even.
Animated series. I think it counts.
Oh yeah,
right?
that's
fine.
Fair enough.
But even in the new movies like Captain Phasma, I'm sorry, but a lot of that is
Yeah, I just wonder, like I was so mad at the trilogy, the Phantom Menace and everything after that, right? I was really mad at that. And I wonder if I would have enjoyed Star Wars as much if in 1977, instead of being 0 years old, I was 35. Because my dad is not like super into Star Wars, and I don't know how any of his peers are. But for us as kids, like me, I was in that prime time of like, there is no such thing as a B movie. It's all amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
It's all believable because I don't know what a story is except it has a beginning and an end,
Right.
and some people have trouble with that.
Yeah.
As long as something blows up in the middle.
Yeah, and lasers.
Yeah, I mean,
Laser guns
like
help. Yeah, that's
yeah, like I used to think that Steven Seagal was a badass actor, right?
Oh,
like
man.
there was a time,
Yeah.
so
Talk about the hero of his own story right there.
Right. So I just kind of wonder that, and so that's why, like, when you start looking at this stuff more critically from when we were younger, we kind of look at that maybe sometimes and go, man, yeah, that actually is kind of simple and not in a good way. So yeah, it's I mean, my wife was like, you got to watch this movie Krull if you've never seen it. We're like, okay, let's watch this movie Krull, and we sat down to watch Krull, and after it was done, she just kind of looked at me and was, I'm sorry. I guess that movie didn't age well at all. Yeah. It was no Beastmaster.
but what is really?
Yeah.
In fairness, so.
All right, so I think we could talk about Star Wars probably all night, but we should probably move on to let's move on to the next question here. Do antagonists need to be human? I think we've talked a little bit about this already. We've touched on it a little bit, or even sentient. That's another thing. What are your guys' thoughts on that? I mean, we got some man versus environment and / nature, and then some self in the chat already. What are your guys' thoughts on that and how to use it effectively?
Yeah, I think that.
There's some.
Go ahead, Danny. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say there's some brain dead villains.
Well, that is also fair. I mean, if you watched, I don't know that I thought about it during the reading of it, but if you watch the Lord of the Rings movies, as an example, the ring is actually a character with agency. I wouldn't say sentience per se, but it's a character with agency in the story, and it's obviously not human, but there is desire and everything else that's built into it, and I think they do a fabulous job of turning it into a character in the films. And the same with, if you've ever read The Terror by Dan Simmons, nature is an adversary in that, because you're fighting against this ridiculous cold, and you can be dead summer, 80 degrees in your bedroom, and you are still like bundling up under the covers because you get such a sense of the cold from that particular book. So yeah, I don't think it needs to be human or sentient or anything. Anything that's a factor that seems to work against you in a very specific and tension-inducing way is fine.
I would say, I mean, one of the most famous genres for both movies and role-playing games is the zombie genre. And zombies are antagonists, and they are not sentient, but they are a force that you have to deal with. Now, I know that, like, right away, you know, it rapidly becomes obvious that man is the true monster, and then you'll have some villains that are people. But for a long time, the main antagonist is just brainless things that you have to not have bite you.
Yeah.
Wait, are you saying there was an undercurrent?
Saying
those?
there's text, and then there's subtext.
Ooh.
Whoa.
Wow, right.
Someone write that down. That nugget.
Oh my! I don't think anyone's
That's
written about it. Yeah. Anywhere.
Note to self: write a book. Got it.
I'm blowing the lid off.
I feel like we've just discovered something here.
Yeah.
We're gonna make so much money.
Yeah.
Quick, shut the Twitch down. We can't let anybody hear it.
All right, everybody, promise to be cool and not talk about this. All right, that's
Yeah.
Subtext, patent pending. Here we are.
Yeah. I mean, villains can be trees and tree pollen. You know.
Oh no! Oh no!
So.
Speaking of the worst villain.
That was so bad. We're talking about the happening, right? That's why.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
The happening where nothing was happening. Yes.
Yeah.
So villains. Well, anything can be a villain, really. An avalanche can be a villain. I believe there's a movie called Avalanche. A tornado made of sharks can be the villain.
I had never thought about the Sharknado as a character, but now that I have, thank you, Danny. That's a gift to me. And now I'm gonna go try to watch it again and some empathy for Sharknado.
I mean,
you're just there, you're just existing, and then everyone's freaking out, right? Like, come on, this is bad rap.
Hey, but where did the Sharknado come from, right? We have to get the backstory
really
of the
want?
Sharknado. And what does it want?
What is the
right?
subtext?
Is
Subtext of
Sharknado really a coming of age story about a storm and a shark that come together? Is that
when a shark and a storm love each other very much?
I mean, it's actually like an orgy of shark and tornado.
That is not the kind of movie I meant. I just want to be clear. That is not not what I was saying.
Okay, I'm just saying. Fanfic for the Sharknado is now inbound.
Wait, does Sharknado?
Actually, I ship the sharks with the hurricanes. And you can read. I have 3,000 pages written on this subject on my blog. So
yeah, they don't care about the tornadoes. It's actually the hurricanes that they care about.
Sharknado / fic a thing? I just want to know if Sharknado / fic. I mean, I actually know. I don't know. No one tell me. No one text me. No one message me.
I'm looking it up right now. Sharknado.
I'm gonna get through about 3 more of these, and it sure is gonna be.
Do not put that on the money-making list, right? That's not one of our future plans. I'm just gonna.
There's only gonna be text.
Whoa! Sharknado versus Barricane.
That's a thing.
Oh.
Well.
All right.
Well,
in the wonderful wild world of fanfic, it is.
There better be a lot of boning in that.
That's.
What's the next question, please?
Yeah. Well, in the chat, we got a King Kong versus Godzilla. What was the villain there?
Us.
I was gonna say that's all. Any given Godzilla, and any given King Kong movie, the man is the real monster. That's just a.
Yeah.
There it is.
It's you can't.
Yeah.
I don't think that. I don't think it's even legal to do anything else. If I'm being honest, I'm pretty.
I mean, think about it. You're just like taking a nap. You're like snoozing. Your 1,000-year snooze, and then suddenly like these ants just start like throwing rocks on you, right? Just over and over again, and then, so finally you get up and you're like, what the hell's going on? So you go and stomp on their little ant piles. Like that's Godzilla. King Kong is like you're just chilling at home, be maybe a little incel kind of, you know, wondering if you're ever going to get the girl. And then, like, here's a pretty girl. And you're like, oh, cool. Hi, pretty girl. And then everyone just starts beating you. And then they kidnap you. Yeah, come on. Rough life. Feel for them.
Yeah. I think this is where I just nod and smile and back away slowly.
My goodness. All right. Let's move on to some application stuff. How do you guys keep your antagonists involved in the story without the players getting tired of them, right? So like you can't keep introducing, they can't be every encounter. It's like I went into the inn, oh, the bad guy's there. We'll go outside, oh, the bad guy's there. How do you know,
do that? That's not how that works.
You know, I mean, I just get tired of them. It's like, okay, you again, come on. No, we've already.
But that's true. That's really true. It is to the point where, like, even if it's not the same individual, if you're just like orcs, I mean, that's why there are gnolls, right? Because we got tired of orcs.
Oh, poor gnolls.
Yeah, gnolls are all dude. Man,
really?
I'm right here.
Like, you know how to, if you want to be clever, introduce the gnolls first.
Well, again with this man, this has been all the notes today. I don't.
Yeah, that's right.
It's gonna be a rewatch for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, that's how to keep them interesting. That's it's definitely about, so in terms of, especially for RPGs, which we're RPG centric. So in terms of RPGs, it's about tying that villain story into the character story, right? And that's actually kind of what it is for everything else as well. It's like the villain has to be tied in. That's why, like, in Black Panther, like, everyone's like, that's a great villain because it ends up being his brother, you know, and he actually was kind of, you know, owed a place in the kingdom and what have you. So yeah, that's it's about keeping that sort of tie-in.
Yeah, it's got it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, making it so the goals of the villain, like, again, you don't want the goals of the villain to just be like, I'm going to kill every puppy. It's like, okay. You want it to be something that's more directly antagonistic to what the players are trying to accomplish. That it's not just that they're doing an evil thing and we need to reactionary stop the evil thing, but that evil thing has to threaten things that they care about or be contrary to things that they're personally concerned with, rather than just, I mean, it's all great, the idea of having a bunch of heroes that are like, an evil thing's happening 3 kingdoms away and we should go arbitrarily stop it. But it's more interesting when it's like it threatens their home or their family or their characters or their livelihood or something that's their, you know, brings them in. Their friend got murdered or their, you know, something to make it, you know, personal.
Yeah, so typically the antagonist is the person with the plan. It's not, I mean, it is true that sometimes you have a plan where the heroes, the protagonists, your players, are off on a quest to do a good thing for the world or whatever. But normally, I'd say in almost every instance of a game, what you have is the players have either been introduced to or have stumbled across the nefarious plans of someone else, or at least the plans of someone else that lead to bad things for themselves and, you know, the world, #world destruction or whatever. So given that you have this timeline plan, it's easy enough to have people doing things. It's not like the villain is sitting there, you know, checking his watch every few minutes. Oh, I'm on now. I'm on. All right, let's go do it. I gotta go do the evil thing. That's not what happens, right? So he's got a plan. He's doing stuff, and what the characters run into along the way are minions or people working in service to whatever that plan is that the antagonist has set up. And it's easy enough to sort of just mention that, to note that it's clear that, oh, this is the part of the plan we just intercepted. This is the part of the plan we just interrupted by killing these gnolls, Danny, in you know, being equal here. Killing the gnolls. This is what we've just done and to disrupt the evil plans. Little bits and clues that lead back to, but don't point to big neon signs saying evil bad guy was here or whatever, right? That's not what we need. So it's more that you just how tying it in so it shows how that intercepts the plan.
Right.
And
yeah.
Speak words. Oh, I was going to just say about how keeping them interesting also is that you're, like Laura's saying, you're finding the plan, but trying to, you know, you only hint at the villain doesn't need to show up in the first adventure kind of thing. You know, they find hints of this villain or little bits. And then when you finally reveal or meet the villain, that should be a big thing. And encountering the actual villain should be these cool moments when it happens. And then you can really pull out all the stops and make the villain interesting or charismatic and, you know, give him a good, but make it so whenever you actually meet the villain, that's a holy shit moment for your campaign, rather than, oh, it's Mustache Steve again doing his thing. He's here like always. We're gonna thwart him.
Right. I mean,
so-
when the main
Steve,
villain
he trolled it. 'cause he-
Yeah.
when the main villain shows up, there needs to be epic boss music. That dude
Right.
needs to do something crazy, like holy, what did I just see? You know, and then he goes away, and you can't do anything about him because he's a big boy.
Or it's Old
And
Man
I
Smithers,
feel it.
right? And he pulls off the mask, and it turns out it was Old Man Smithers all along. That also works, but
Right.
Well, and so yeah, to piggyback off of that, and Laura hits it right on the nose, is I don't necessarily
Okay.
think that, oh, you have to save the villain till later, but whatever that reveal is does need to be a
Right.
surprise. It needs to be a reveal, right? So even if they've seen their villain, it's like not realizing that this was the villain and now it is the villain, or realizing that the villain's plan is actually this whole other thing, and is tied into another just branch of this story, which might then evolve into another villain behind the scenes. Like, but yeah, that reveal, that surprise, that thing that makes them go, wow, I didn't see this coming.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we got Combat Matic Bush said, have the villain continue with the plan, and the plan keeps getting worse and worse for the party if they don't deal with it. What do you guys think about that? Is there a certain time and place for that? Should that be pretty consistent, like the players trying to foil what's going on there, or do you think it should happen maybe intermittently?
I actually ran I ran a vampire game back in the day. You'll be surprised because I ran a vampire game.
yes, that reveal
with
was
vamp- with
shocking.
vampires?
Walter.
Shocking. I'd never do. It wasn't the thing I ran obsessively for many years. But anyway, the idea was, it was just a thing. But as it was sort of the main adventure was kind of structured as a road trip where they're trying to get from point A to point B. And every time the heroes kind of fucked up, which happens sometimes, it sort of raised the level of antagonism. So the idea is that you build that, but that sort of thing where you have this like gradually building thing that the players can hopefully do or not do, to sort of build that, and then it just everything in the background gets harder, and you can add these effects to it as you go. That like the farther the villain's plan comes along, the darker the city is, or the more fearful looks on the face of the peasants as you walk by, or in this case, these ideas.
No, Walter, that's again.
Did it drop? Oh,
It did.
It dropped again, but I came back this time.
The idea is where we left off.
The idea that it sort of spreads slowly gives you a slow build, that you can do that, and that keeps people invested and kind of keeps up pressure on them that they have to do these things. Of course, you have to be careful with it because in my case, the players royally screwed everything up on like the first 2 days, and I was already
Like they do.
points, and the things were on fire, and it was like, well, I obviously didn't scale this well based on what it was. And a gas station blew up, and that was mostly the end of the adventure. But that was probably 70% my fault, but I am putting 30% on them.
Yeah, so
Kinder Mage wants to know real quick, did you have the expensive teeth for the vampire LARP?
Oh, you don't. We're not going to spend too much time talking about high school / college goth Walter and what he was into, but he was a super cool guy, so you just don't worry about that. It was a real neat dude.
that's yeah.
Serious.
I can't
Sorry,
even imagine.
Laura, go
No.
ahead.
All I was going to say is that I think that from a traditional storytelling arc, the basic way of telling the story is that for any given plateau, you have a thing that the players want to achieve. You want them ideally to try and fail, and the third time, that third attempt is what gets them through. So the idea of having things get worse and worse, having the villain continue to make things more difficult, yeah, that is absolutely good traditional storytelling. And it doesn't have to be that specific formula every time, but they're given a thing to try to do, and they almost succeed, but they don't quite thwart the guy, right? They don't quite win, and so then he comes back, aha, I am stronger now, and again, we failed. And so you can do that multiple times, that series of try, fail, succeed, multiple times throughout any given campaign or storyline or anything. So yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, and it also plays into, my advice a lot of times is that you want to make sure you know what's happening in the world, right? So your players, they're going to go where they want to go, and if you don't know what's happening in the world, that becomes a lot more difficult to manage because you're like, well, I don't know what's happening over there, and that's where they want to go. So it's the same thing. Like if your villain is just doing villain stuff over here and the players don't go deal with it, you just kind of like, all right, well, we'll do this. But now this thing that was happening is happening. And then that ties into everything else, the advancement of of, you know, the negative circumstances of the kingdom and all the peasants looking at you like, why didn't you save us before? We're dead now. Now we're zombies. And it's really all about man. So yeah, just
man.
yeah. So just having that, I think that's really good to just keep in mind that there are things happening beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so. Just to wrap up this question here, I think pacing, right? You have to if you have a singular bad dude or entity or whatever or monster or orc or goblin or whatever,
Or Knoll. Don't forget the Knolls.
Or Knoll.
Oh wow!
I know, right?
We just
It's just,
talked about Knolls.
I know.
I know.
I'm embarrassed for everybody, but that's okay.
It's you know, you have to spread them out. Can't be all at once. Can't be all the time. And it has to be interesting when he does show up, and it has to mean something to the players.
Mhm.
So, interesting question in the chat. What does the panel think about using multiple factions, I guess, as antagonists, or would you rather have a single villain or single faction that they have to deal with? Walter, you look very happy.
Multiple factions are always so good. That's for your political games, especially. That's where it's at. And then you get into this whole everyone's kind of a bastard, but no one's the person you have to stop. So it really changes. Like that's where. Again, we're going to talk about Vampire a lot. Sorry.
I was going to say, you play Vampire, right?
Don't invite me to the panel if you don't want to hear about Vampire. That's how we're going to do. But screw it. We're going to talk. We could also talk about Shadowrun. You know, you have a bunch of mega corporations that are all different factions and have different goals. Or like in Vampire, you have these different clans or political groups or whatever. But yeah, that makes it even more fun because then the person that's your antagonist one week, you might find common cause with the next week against somebody else. No one's necessarily your enemy forever until then you can burn some bridges, and then all of a sudden, yeah, that guy now will never work with us again, and we have turned him from just a conflict to an antagonist, and you get to sort of build those relationships as you go. You might
until you do have to work with him again, actually.
Right, and it might even be worse next time when you show up. So
hey.
These are so multiple factions are grand. You don't get quite as much good mustache twirling monologues, but it makes for a very good game as well.
Hey, Walter, Kender Mage noted that your Camarilla is showing.
What? I don't know anything about. There's not like a dozen vampire books right
next to off, just off screen.
Not behind me, off just over the So whatever. It's cool. It's a cool game for cool people. 5th edition.
So I totally love multiple factions also. I am 100% with Walter on this because just like in real life, you go into like one of the main cities that my players in my current campaign are in right now. There's this mining families, there are merchants, there is a church, and none of those people, those guys are all powerful groups of people, right, that all have their own axes to grind. And not one of them is going to go, aha, yes, I 100% agree with the players and we must do everything that these strangers to our town say, right? That's not a thing. So, I mean, I guess in some games it can end up being that way, but that's not certainly the way I play it. And so each of those groups has their own thing, and they can get help from all of them or some of them or none of them, or advice or anything, but they're all going to get a different slant to that. And each of those people are helpful, but also antagonistic in some way because it's going to kind of pit them against some of the other groups as well. So the decision they make to help these guys might hurt them with this other group. So yeah, I love multiple factions. Love it.
So multiple factions, yes, no. Where are you in the story? At the beginning of the story, perhaps you don't need multiple factions, especially if it's like Dungeons and Dragons. You got a bunch of first level characters. They're going to go do a thing. Maybe you don't need multiple factions. Or how long have you been telling stories and working with stuff? Because multiple factions starts to sort of become, well, not starts to, it is just inherently more to coordinate than just, a single line story. So yes, it is definitely a lot better and more interesting generally if you have multiple factions, but but you do have to just make sure that you are comfortable running the various factions that you're running. If you get into a situation, like even if you get a module and there's just all these factions and you're just trying to keep track of everything, you can whittle that down and just kind of ignore certain parts as you need to, just to kind of keep things simple for yourself, if that's what you need for your table. But if you can manage it, yeah, factions. The best game I played was multiple dungeon masters. It was on a computer medium, and players belonged to several factions, usually about 3 major factions and then maybe another 4 or 5 minor factions. And there was just a lot of interplay between
That sounds
them.
super fun.
So yeah. And then as far as the maximum number of factions, however many you can handle. And
or makes sense with
organized.
a story, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I would say, however, as long as it stays interesting. I mean, at some point, right, you get to 100 and people are like, I don't freaking know which one is which anymore. And I think, right, and I mean, and I apologize to Danny in advance for what I'm about to say, but I think with the Tokyo missions, with the Shadowrun stuff, I found myself, I remember sitting at tables of 8 people, and some of us are actual like note-taking gamers, and we're like, which one is that? Like, which Yakuza boss is that? We couldn't, just the name, again, I think between the names being so strange and having no ties to them, and all of them kind of looking the same from wearing the suits, they with like one exception, right? They all kind of dress the same and talk the same and act the same as all this. Which one is this? Is this the guy who's
do we like
hates,
this
right?
guy?
Is this the one we like? Do we hate him? Which one? Is this the one with the grandkid? Right? We're doing those kind of things, and I don't know. I found that at some point to be frustrating, but.
Yeah, no, I can see that because there's not enough variety between some of them to actually say like, oh, this is a different guy. And you know, one of the fun things kind of about that is that was, for part of it, it was built in. I mean, that was one of the whole points of that story is there's the old guard and there's the new guard, right? So like you said, with the exception of one, and then there was also like one female in the bunch, right. And those 2 were in the other group, and then the other 3, there was 3 that were in the one group, and they're pretty much very similar. And yeah, it was part of that like story, but it definitely makes sense about why, you know, you would just be like, is this the one that had the thing? And that can be a little confusing when you're talking about your factions.
Yeah, so I just mean, as long as you can differentiate between them in a meaningful way, I think that's the important thing for the player. Is you can have 20 of them if they all are distinct enough and mean different things enough. I think that's fine. Otherwise, you know, maybe the smaller number is better. But there's no limit, I don't think, as long as it makes sense to keep doing it.
I think we can also say. Oh,
go ahead.
I was going to say we could also segue into the if you want to eat your cake and have it too sort of situation. You can always do the Final Fantasy gambit where, you know, you have your villain and they're bad and you go for a long time. And then, of course, eventually it's revealed that there's a more villain. And that villain is retrieved. And then the old villain becomes your, at least, co-protagonist because you got to fight the new villain. And it lets you introduce sort of another faction while not running them necessarily concurrently but sequentially, but you still get to introduce like a new faction, and you put a new spin on your old antagonist, so that makes it kind of exciting.
So not necessarily a full heel turn, but more of an enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of.
Right. Yeah. It's like I'm angry, and they do it like it's in every Final Fantasy game. Where they're like,
every one of them.
Angry. Yeah, you know, the first cool guy in armor you see, you're like, we're gonna be friends with him by the end of the game. So,
yep.
But yeah.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, you're not necessarily friends with them because they'll still, like, usually make, like, a bunch of snarky comments about how it's like, remember the time I murder, and you're like, oh, why are you so... Anyway.
Yeah.
I do remember that, and it was awful.
That was a direct quote.
Yeah.
As long as I guess you don't do it clumsily. I didn't get to talk about the villain I hated.
Oh, sorry.
Which is from the Dark Tower series, where it made me so angry that you had this, the later ones. It was like book 6 or so. Anyway, at the point when they had like this, you had this cool villain. You had Flynn and he's or Richard Flagg or whatever his name, and he was bad, and the whole movie, the whole book, not the movie. We won't talk about that.
Please
the whole book series, you have this cool guy, and then in one of the later books, the new villain shows up and just like murders that guy, and you're like, oh, okay. And he's like, no, I'm really dangerous because I just killed this guy. That was cool. And you're like, go to hell. Who are you? I don't know who the hell you are. Why? And then you have this new villain you don't give a shit about. And the only thing is the game master, Stephen King, is like, no, he's real bad. You can tell because I just offed the guy that you gave any shits about.
And that's the only credit he has at this point.
Right, so don't do that. That's what I'm saying.
Didn't he also kill the dog? Didn't he also kill the dog? Like, wasn't that a proof of, no, look how bad I am. I even killed the dog you love. And I was like, oh, come on, man.
Yeah, that's
So spoilers for
definitely
the Dark Tower series, by the way.
yeah. If you haven't read it yet, too bad. Yeah, no, that's actually kind of similar to that. That's why I never. That's why I never liked the movie Taken, Liam Neeson, because like just as I was getting to like
skills.
Yeah, just as I was getting to like be like, all right, this villain, like he would kill that guy, and then you'd find out he was just like the pawn and like the next, the next big fish kind of, guy, and then he would go after that. So I never got a chance to like develop any empathy for a particular villain. So I just didn't care. I was like, okay, well, is that guy's cool. I guess he knows Kung Fu and stuff, but I only have known him for 5 minutes in this movie. So
Just the next guy on the murder checklist. So
yeah, a lot of anime does that as well. I mean, it's just we fought this guy, we're powered up now. Oh, now there's a bigger guy. Now we fight with the guy we just beat. Yeah. And now we're gonna beat this new guy.
Yeah.
Guys, yeah, it happens all the time. And Final Fantasy is basically anime, right? So
yes. Anime with more high potions.
Except for
Combat Medic.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was going to digress into Final Fantasy. It's completely unnecessary. I was going to bitch about Final Fantasy dress up, and it's not necessary at all. It's not.
Let's see. So Combat Medic Bush, thoughts on using the one goblin who got away and trains up. He gets super strong and comes back later, and now he's the big boy. Like a Middle Earth Shadow of War, or like the Shadow of Middle Earth. Those games, the more recent ones, with the Nemesis system, where if you beat a dude or he beats you, he levels up in ranks and things like that.
Well, that's how it happens in real life. So I think that's very legit. And
yeah, right.
That's at school when I would beat up the bully, then like the next one would come in and take his place. And I actually had to do that one time. These bullies were picking on me, and they were like, you gotta punch this kid, like it was the smallest of the bullies. And they're like, and if you beat him up, then you got to fight me, and then you got to fight me. They actually did that, and I only beat up the first one with a well-timed kick to the junk, and then the next one beat me up.
You should have saved before that second fight.
I should have saved. So
should have bought more high potions and revives.
It really happened in real life, because it does. It happened to me.
Yeah. No. So
random stories.
So if we're gonna tell random being bullied stories, there's a girl. Apparently, I bumped her with my book bag on the bus. This is when I was like 12 years old. I bumped her with my book bag on the bus. Right. She came to my house. She came to my front door, and I have got the door opens on the inside, and then the screen door. So I opened up the main door, and she's standing there outside, and she and her buddy there on the front porch saying, "You have to come out and fight me." And I looked at her, I just tilted my head, and she goes, "No, you got to come out here and fight me, because you hit me on the school bus." And and my dad walked up behind me, and he let me, to his credit, let me handle her. Right? He just walked in and, "No, you have to come out here and fight me." I was like, I don't think I do. Right? I just opted out of the fight. Right? I shut the door, because I was like, I'm almost certain.
That's literally that story.
Right?
That's the story right there. Like, you hit her, right, and knocked her book out, right, and she was defeated. So she went and trained up and got a buddy and came to your house to be a villain again. See, it's real.
Yeah.
I'm waiting. We're gonna hear a knock on Laura's door right now.
Yeah.
Be like, I've been waiting for years for this opportunity.
Yeah.
To do it.
Uma Thurman's gonna be there.
Freaking screen door.
Uma Thurman.
So...
I want to talk about Uma Thurman. You did it.
Okay.
That's exactly what I first wanted to talk about. Is that the best part? I was going to tell the story, but everyone was telling real life stories, so then I was just going to pretend I was Uma Thurman.
When I was a vampire.
When I was killed by hitmen. That part where she goes to what's her name's house and murders the woman who she tried to murder her, and then her daughter's all like, and she's like, someday when you're going to be real sore about this in like 20 years, you come back and let's do this. And it's like, yeah, I want that scene in my games. You should murder a pack of goblins and then have a little kid goblin be like, and like pick up their dead dad's sword and like look at you and be like, oh shit, we're going to see him before the end of this story. And then if you have terrible players, they murder that child. But hopefully he gets away.
Loose end.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, yes. Oh, seed villain, unintentionally created villains propagating the cycle of violence and everything. Oh, it feels so good. Yeah, do that.
So recurring villain, like if they come back, they're still alive, is good. But what about reviving the person you already killed? How do we feel about that? I know one of the
Don't do
I
it
stopped
shitty.
watching.
Don't do it.
Yeah, I stopped watching is the series Arrow. I stopped the WB series. I stopped watching that because literally everyone got revived. Spoilers, whoever's watching that got
No.
revived at least 3 times. Every one of them. And I was like, this is dumb. This is dumb. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but constant, or maybe once, maybe.
Well, it
What do you guys
happens
think
in
about
real life. This one time when
At first, Bully died, but then
yeah, this is my 4th life, so I mean, really, no, it's I agree. It's like any trope, right? It's the guy falls off the cliff. Did he die? We don't know, sort of thing. But you do have worlds where there is magic that brings people back to life, and so
Sure.
use sparingly, and in a situation where like that has been set up, right? So like not I murdered this guy and then we spread his ashes to the 4 winds and then we buried his heart in the thing, which actually that in of itself is a setup. But so like you kill them and then their followers somehow take the body and you allow them to reverently carry it away or something, whatever, then you have that option. But if it's you just kind of have to read that. Is this the end of this villain, or is there more for this villain to do?
and I mean, I think the most important thing is you have to be careful. The biggest thing is you don't want to steal the sense of accomplishment from your players. That's like they finally thwarted this villain and they won, and then you're like, "Lols, fooled you. He's fine." And bring it back.
that sucks.
Yeah, no, that's
that sucks.
But then there's
That
a lot
wasn't
of
my
ways.
final form.
Right. Well, if you do that, if you do like a 3-stage battle, yeah, knock yourself out. Like if they get back up 2 seconds after the fight, that's 100% anime legit.
Yes.
But if they come back in several sessions, then it's more of the cop out.
Yeah, I think it's.
But I mean, and there's still cool ways to do it. Like I mean, imagine the character, you beat the villain, and then of course you start seeing, there's rumors of the villain coming back, and you see a character in the distance that's wearing their signature face mask or whatever, and you're like, oh no, the villain, she's dead though, we killed her, and then the big reveal is it's her daughter or whatever. You can do ways to sort of bring a villain back in interesting ways that aren't literally bringing them back. But yeah, just be careful about how you do it to make it interesting and not. Man, I wrote a lot of pages about this villain, and I really can't be asked to make a new one. So
That'd be like so many more
don't
pages. I don't know. I don't.
So I wrote so much, and I have this drawing I made. Whatever. So yeah, don't suck.
No, and I think the one caveat to that I will add is if you are running the kind of game where that thing is expected and you steer into the skid of it, like I'm thinking if you look at Supernatural, the TV show, they are self-aware about the fact that those guys come back over and over and over, right? But that's a whole other thing where you've taken a trope and gone, okay, we're just going to steer into this. This is funny, and we're going to enjoy this for what it is. That's one thing. I'm not saying it can't work in that respect, but I totally agree with the idea that by and large, make a new villain. If you want the villain to absorb the essence of that first villain in some way and then express traits of him, because that's cool, right? That can work. But I think by and large, like I love the idea that you should not steal the victory from the jaws of your players. As they think they've won, and then no, we haven't. Not well. I mean, you should do it at least once, but you don't do it over and over again with the same guy.
Yeah, that kind of ties into. We had a question earlier from Stainless Steel Devil Rat. How invincible should a villain's plot armor be? Would it like how like if they're gonna get into it and whatever happens? I mean, how much plot armor should they have? Should they survive? Should they go ahead and die and just revive them? And is that plot armor? Like what do you guys think about that?
Villains don't have plot armor.
If they punch them in the face hard enough, I mean, they should die, right? Like,
yeah. Villains don't have plot armor in my games. Players might from time to time, depending on what's happening. So like these preludes that I just ran for our upcoming stream, it's preludes, right? So obviously those characters survive to arrive at like where we're going to start the game. So there's some plot armor there, right? But villains, no. If I am not clever enough to figure out a way for my villain to not die through use of the rules, then that villain gets to just be dead. I guess he wasn't really that important. But there's a lot of
That's fair.
Just because there's so many tools. Like Misty Step is a 2nd level spell. Just running away with something that gives you 5 extra feet of movement, and just, but if you put the villain, boop, in a large empty field surrounded by your superheroes and they kill him, that's on you, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're bad. Maybe, you're trying to figure it out. I was in a game where we pretty much kicked Strahd's ass at like 5th level.
Nice.
And it's because the game master was new and was trying to learn all the various things, and so didn't really work the spells properly and didn't work the terrain to their advantage properly, right? Because they're used to kind of playing more upfront characters. So and that's just a learning experience, but it's there were tools there and you just didn't know to use them. So yeah, it's they don't have plot armor. If they die, that's good for you. You get that sense of accomplishment, and great.
Well, and I mean, unless you're writing a very different game than I think is conventional, a very different story that I think is conventional, traditional, none of the characters that you create should be eternal, right? It's not like you're expecting that guy to be the only villain or antagonist or whatever that you have in perpetuity. And if you haven't planned for the fact that that's character is defeatable at some point, then what's the point, right? How were the characters ever expected to have victory? And again, I'm not saying engineer his defeat, make them work for it 100%. But at some point, you have to have assumed that there was an end to that character, right? Else, what was kind of the point of the story? I don't know.
I will say I am a big fan of I have a story planned sometimes, and that means that villain does not get to leave just yet. But I will say that plot armor should be inversely proportional to how clever the players are.
Yes.
So, if the players just, whatever, somebody decides to swing a thing, yeah, that guy might have a spell that maybe he didn't have before that section and gets away. Because I'm like, what? No, he's got to go. But if they have like all these cool things and they like come up with a really clever plan and like take into account like,
no, come back.
Don't leave.
I don't.
I know. I'm bated breath. I need to hear how it ends. Walter, come back and finish your story.
I can't. While we wait for him to come back, killing Strahd, if they know the weaknesses, do you change those weaknesses up to keep the players on their toes?
That's a great question.
Yes, I say I don't necessarily believe in running most modules or creatures exactly as written, especially over and over again. Because
I'm sorry, I don't know why my internet's so bad. Hi.
No, that's okay. You're back. All that you missed, Walter, was Danny asking the question about whether or not you should. Actually, I don't remember how you worded it. You worded it again, Danny.
It's from the chat. So if they know the vampire has a weakness, do you change the weaknesses? But that was only because we didn't know how long it was going to be before our actual vampire returned.
Oh,
right.
Now
nice.
I want to know what we need to take into account.
What do we have to take into account, Walter? Oh, you have a cat.
Oh,
I have to take a cat into account.
I do. Sorry, this is Imperator Furiosa had to come say hello, and she's in there. No, like if you've hinted and given this vampire a weakness that the characters have through their ingenuity or whatever figured out, yeah, they should have that weakness. And if they exploit it, that's the point. That's the point of them learning about that weakness, is to be interested.
I took the question to be like if they've played the module before and they're already aware, or like they have like meta knowledge about vampires in general, or about Strahd. Meta knowledge is what I think that the question is actually.
Oh,
yeah, I think it's meta knowledge.
Yeah, he's gonna have all sorts of weird nonsense going on.
Yeah, there you go.
So I mean, no, but ideally, again, I will make that up beforehand, right. Be sort of prepared for it, and again, seed that. The interesting part is finding out what these weaknesses are. Ways to defeat a villain and going with it. So as a game master, you should seed that in. There should be ways they can find that. Make them skill checks matter. Sort of things that they can find, but. No, if somebody tries to come up and be like, well, when I played Cursor Strahd last time, he had not today. He's coming into the stakes, do nothing, whatever. You need to. I'll find some really obscure folklore to give him some weaknesses from.
Yeah. No, and actually some modules even write that in. I know that with the Enemy Within campaign, for example, for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the original had a bunch of stuff, and the notations in the new version of the module for the most recent edition say, if your players have played this before and think they know everything, blah, and it tells you all the stuff about how to rework it, like how to change stuff up specifically so that your players who have that meta knowledge will still be surprised by what's going on, which I think is kind of cool. Kind of a cool addendum to the
It also depends on the maturity of the players, right? So, you know, one of the things when we're getting into some of our streams, I have, like, you know, in our session 0, I have, these are expectations, right? And so one of the expectations is to not meta game, but at the same time, like, I'm not going to know what you know about every single sort of monster, right? So then what we do is there's skill checks. You can roll a skill check. Oh man, does my character know that Gorgons can turn you to stone? Skill check, right? And then I tell them, though, but if you know this information, I don't want you to just play dumb the whole time. Figure it out, right? So, like, have your character figure it out in about 3 to 4 combat turns. Like, you know, just so that at least there's some time where you're, like, getting to kind of play through this, because that's the story is more important than the mechanics of the creature at the end of the day. So you don't charge in and go, oh, Gorgon, this. But if after, you know, several turns, you're like, why is my water spell not working? Let me try fire on this troll. Ooh, you know, and there you go.
Yeah, role play with it, right?
Fine. Right.
Yeah, because you're rolling in. Oh, troll, boom. Here's a list of spells and weaknesses. Here you go, party. This is for you. That sucks. No, that completely breaks immersion. It's not fun, and it's okay. I mean, yeah, but also, right?
But the idea of changing it is built in. So, like, what's I think a spirit troll is fire does not hurt them. I mean, there is a troll that, like, it's something totally different, and in the meantime, they're extra murdery. So you're all like, fire and acid, haha, and then you're like, nope, not working, and also take additional damage from just being by it.
Yeah.
So we got a question from Stainless Steel Devil Rat here. Another villain question for you guys. How do you represent intelligences beyond human potential? And when you're the GM, how do you keep a demigod or some kind of ancient dragon, some kind of supreme intelligence from making dumb decisions because you're the GM?
Well, there is no such thing as anything that I could make up that would be smarter than me. So,
yeah,
that's
nap.
Yeah, hubris is the word of the day. You explain it away by hubris. You know, like, the villain thought he knew better and thought he had you fooled somehow, and because he's just been doing this so long, he got a little lackadaisical in his implementation, and so he did something
real dumb,
miscalculated.
Yeah, and I don't know what I don't want to speak for, and I have been a player, so understand that when I say what I'm about to say, I'm including myself at varying points in this, but players, especially collectively, aren't all that clever, right? They do some amazing things overall. And so I know. So I'm just thinking, right? So, like, I love my players, but their entire book of strategy is a single piece of paper that says "get them." That is their entire thing right there. So I mean,
I love that.
Right? Honestly, I don't think that you have to worry too much about you making your super intelligent villain look stupid. But yeah, I think hubris, however you want to say that, is actually a real boon, because anything that is that smart is going to see themselves as being, very few are going to be both very intelligent and really self-aware and humble, right? Those two things just don't typically go together. So,
right.
Yeah, anyway, I tend to think that the players would do plenty to give you opportunities to be much smarter than they are.
Yeah, I mean, every time players walk into a room and then just completely either clump up or spread out, right? I'm just like,
yep,
yeah, no, we're fine. I don't have to be that smart.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like it's kind of like watching, like, the Judge Judys of the world, right? I feel really smart sometimes when I'm
right.
Yeah. So,
my big thing is just, the nice thing is you have the advantage of planning everything that happens ahead of time. Hopefully you get there, so you get to make up contingency plans. So whatever your villain does, you know, assume, yeah, he might lose this conflict. What's plan B? You know, because that makes them seem real smart when you get to do the here's your thing. You bested them, but they have this ready, and now that's the next thing that they're going, or this is their contingency for that happened. And you get to make all those up because you got to spend a couple hours thinking about it, and they're just like, oh shit, villain. Let's do the thing. And that, I mean, you get to be smarter because you get hours of planning. Correct. And your players get 10 minutes of, oh my god, a fight.
Yeah.
So that helps. That goes a long way to being able to make them seem real smart.
Yeah,
that's a good point. You know, just go ahead and have something ready. Like if the players somehow defeat or are about to defeat, here's how they escape, or here's, you know, in a logical way with the rules, like Danny was talking about, this is how they get away, or this is how they foil the plan, or, you know, stop what the train wreck that's about to happen. I think it's a good idea.
Better, reveal why you killing the cult that was about to do the ritual, that if it went off was really bad, secretly plays into their next plot, which was this cult being gone leaves open this thing that really they wanted that to happen. Aha! You know, you can do wheels within wheels nonsense because you're making it all up. It's great. So, and if they don't stop the cult, well, then obviously the cult was the plan. But if they do stop the cult, well, now you're in a position, and the power vacuum of the cult being gone has led to the rise of super bad bureaucracy, whatever. I don't know.
Bad bureaucracy is your villain?
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes it could be the real villain secretly was bureaucracy.
Paperwork! That's what
it was man.
It was man. There it is.
It was man. That's villain.
All right, guys. You. So, question for you guys. So, how much do you plan for your antagonists? Like, do you know their entire backstory up from when they were wee little babies, or do you just say, hey, here's this person as they are now, they are cool, they do these legendary actions because they are who they are?
I find that planning a character out really far before I introduce them to my players is a recipe for heartbreak. So because that's when I make up a really cool backstory, and everyone's like, we're not really engaged with this guy. That doesn't really say, yeah, he's okay. And then they're like, but again, tell us about that goblin that got away, because that guy probably has thoughts. And you're like, oh, I didn't plan for that. So I at least try to wait a little bit until I can kind of suss out what characters the players find interesting and want to know more about. So I'm not sitting here staring at my ream of paper that I'm like, no, it's very interesting. Listen to it, you monsters. Pearls before swine. So instead, wait, and then if they're like, oh, this guy seems really cool, and they're obviously very interested in this big villain backstory, then be like, yes, now when they were 10, then get into the cool background and explain why they're doing what they're doing to make them interesting. But if you do it ahead of time, that's where sadness happens. So
yeah, I tend to like the big bad guy to be sort of the puppet master in the background, or a series of events that led to things, because like Walter said, that makes it easier to adjust, because any given person, thing, sentient slice of angry cheese that they run into can be turned into a villain, right? I mean, any of that can be, if they decide. And I did learn from Walter's Heartbreak, where I had a couple of characters who I didn't expect the characters to the players to invest in at all, and then all of a sudden they were the ones that they cared about. And I was like, all right, well, cool. So I guess this guy's a thing now. But there was a space for him, because I had this sort of puppet master. There was a hole there that was that character shape that I could just shove him into and be all right. Yep, I got him now. We're good. Got a bad guy.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. It just kind of comes down to whatever you do. I mean, if you want to, like, on this day he was born, and then this happened in the first whatever, yada yada, hey, knock yourself out. There are some people who that is the joy, and I think that is that's legitimate. Be prepared for players not to care about it, if you know.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if that's what you want to do. However, the only thing that the players need to know, and the only thing you have to prepare minimally, is what's important for the story we're telling, right? So I don't need to know where and when the bad guy was born if that has no importance to why the bad guy is a
Sure.
villain today and where he got his powers from, right? Or she. So that's kind of the thing there. And a lot of times I leave holes so that they can be filled based on player supposition and their actions, right? So if I have a villain, I might have a villain prepared, and then somewhere in session 3 or 4, the players do something, and I'm like, you know what? That actually, I'm going to say that it has second order of effects that go to this villain, and it's a little bit of a riff on the goblin that got away, I guess, but in this case, you didn't directly affect the guy, so he's not like the guy that got away, but he's the guy that got affected by the BS that you did over here. And so those are things that can go into that development, because I think villains should also develop as the story goes.
Yeah, they're doing stuff on the side.
Right.
Well, the villain ideal, if you do have a perpetual villain, or at least a long-lived one, I think that they should also evolve with the players. They're not going to start out. The villain doesn't start out as demigod while your players start off as peons, right? They should start out more like this and then grow together as they go. So I think that there's value there too, of watching the villainy increase and watching your players impact on the villain. That each time one of his or her plans is thwarted, that just, oh my god, no, I have to do the thing now even harder. More puppies have to die because of you. It's your fault, hero.
Who are these people that just keep stop?
Yeah.
The cult of murder puppies.
Yeah.
I think that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have a personal question about just backstory in general. Have you guys ever used flashbacks in your stories? Like at a certain point in the story, boom, you're watching movies, you're playing a video game or whatever, just boom, flashback happens, and you're given all of this backstory content for a specific set of people or a person. Have you guys ever used that in your games?
I have not. I don't see. I think flashbacks work great in visual medium because you can just stop and then go play a movie, right? I think it's harder to make them work now. What I will have is they'll run into people who know the history of something, and then it's up to the players to engage with that story and ask questions and so forth. I also don't like data dumps that aren't contextual, that aren't causing tension or conflict or something. I don't like just this whole sort of, no, let me spend the next 7 minutes reading to you from my handwritten box text. Right? That seems, no, we're not doing that. But I do like to give them a chance to meet people who know the history, or to encounter a library or a gallery or something where they might stumble across stories and little snippets and learn bits and pieces that give them context for whatever they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of just the flashback, so in writing, flashback is legitimate. You just got to be careful about not like overusing it for just exposition, but rather actually telling more story that just happens to have happened previously. In games, flashbacks can be really fun if the players get to play characters in the flashback.
Yeah,
right?
that I can see.
Yes.
Yes,
That could be
I
really
would like
cool.
that. Yeah.
And again, it calls forth, you've got to really plan that properly, because we're talking about a thing that happened already. So if you give them all characters that were supposed to survive, and then like they start dying, then you're kind of like, oh well, I guess that's not how it happened. So you've got to really set it up in a way that makes it make sense, tells the story that you want to tell, so they get the information that you need them to have, but also however they play it doesn't like change what you're trying to do in the current timeline. And that just kind of comes to almost everything when you're telling stories and stuff, and it kind of calls back to the how fleshed out are your characters. Make as much background as you want, write it down, make your big long box text and stuff if that's what brings you joy in your world creation. But when it comes time to give that information to the players, give them what they need to know, even if they're asking. Like, I'm at the library, I'm studying up on ancient werewolf cultures in the jungle over here, and I want to know about that, and you have all this information. Give them the nuts and bolts, the simple part, what they need to carry on, and then you can just give them a handout for the actual full thing, and they can look at that at their pleasure or not, or but you don't need to read that whole thing to them, because that stops the story, and the story is everything.
Walter will be back in just a moment. He's gonna go try to plug in Hardline. So
Perfect. So let's see. Let's move on to the next question, guys. This is going really well, I think. So let's kind of change gears for just a second. What do you guys think about everyday antagonists or like a baddie of the week, instead of like the big overarching villain? Like how do you guys handle those, and how do they differ from the big guys?
well, I think from my perspective, I mean, some of them, not all of them necessarily, but some of them are going to be minions in service to the bad guy and doing things in service to the big bad guy. But I think beyond that, one of the things I think is interesting is that they're all going to have their own motivations. I like to have a break from the big overarching plot occasionally and just have a sort of a monster of the week approach where, this is somebody else. You've run across this other guy with another thing, another gal with another plan, whatever. And
we need some money. We're gonna go kill the thing.
Yeah, and or just they're wandering through and there happen to be things, giant rats there. I think one of the things that's important is that those monsters act in accordance with who they are, right? I mean, as a rule, your bunch of rats, as distinct from gnolls, which are very intelligent, worthy foes and beings.
It's actually really hard to play them properly because they're so smart.
Right, that exactly.
Their brains are so big.
It's such a challenge. But giant rats, a bunch of giant rats, the rats aren't going to be sitting back there going, okay, so everybody read Art of War, right? So I'm going to go on the left and you're going to go on the right. And we got this plan. That's not how rats are. Rats are hungry. Rats are angry. Rats are maybe mad that you're in their territory. Having whatever they're fighting act like whatever they're fighting, in search of food. And that includes when they choose to fight. And big predators, for example, if they're not hungry, they aren't going to kill you just because. Outside of a few, right? So having them act like the monsters that they are, I think is one of the important things to keep them interesting, is just let them be who and what they are. Let them be bears or whatever, right?
For sure. So I mean, we know that it's a legitimate and valid approach because we see it in serial television and the like, right? So those stories work for people. Maybe they're not like your cup of tea or my cup of tea. I don't have a problem with it personally, but some people don't like that sort of thing. Like my wife is generally not into monster of the week television shows, right? But at the same time, it's still valid, and so you can run it like that. I mean, that's kind of how missions runs. A lot of living campaigns kind of run that way. Yeah, there's this sort of story arc that ties everything together, but each module, each situation is its own, self-contained monster of the week. And then last time we were on on Zone of Truth, we were talking about there's a role-playing game called Monster of the Week, which is literally trying to play that sort of story out. So I think it's very valid. It just kind of depends on the style. A GM that I know uses Monster of the Week whenever people don't show up. So if someone can't make it, then he just develops a reason why there's suddenly this little side quest where we have to go do this Monster of the Week, and then we come back to the main quest. Yeah.
Walter, the question, we kind of switched gears a little bit. What are your thoughts on everyday antagonists or baddies of the week or monsters of the week kind of mentality, and how do you usually approach them as opposed to the big bad guy?
I mean, I agree. Like, I think, again, it's your group and what you're into. Some people really like Buffy, and some people really don't like Buffy. They don't want that sort of thing. But, that is a cool story. Also, it lets you... I like Monsters of the Week sometimes because it lets you do a villain that would not be interesting for a campaign, but would be interesting for one story, right? It's like there's a difference between short stories and novels. And for a short story, I only need it to be interesting for this many pages, and it can be really cool, but it would get real boring if I came back week after week with this villain or whatever. So it lets you do nonsense or little things or like a cool idea you had that maybe doesn't have enough for a full to do. And it gives a little bit of a break. Sometimes you need something to get in between. The bad guy got defeated, and he needs some time to lick his wounds, so he doesn't show up next week, or his plans are, it lets you, let the players get an idea that it's like, he's been bested, so we don't have to worry about it when they're going to come back, and so you can do a few weeks of other things. There's other bad guys in the world that maybe aren't overwhelmingly. It also lets you tell some stories that are Like, usually your big villain is going to be like, the world's at stake, or our country's at stake, civilization, big stakes that are serious business sort of things, because that's the big story. But sometimes it's neat to be like, oh, this family's in danger because of this one minor level villain that's still important to deal with, and you can tell an interesting story and have it have pathos and whatnot, whereas it's not maybe the thing that they need to go do all the time. And maybe even really drive home to people that there's a lot of like little problems that need to be solved and they'll never have time to deal with all of them. And make them feel bad when they have to go fight the big whatever. It's like, oh, you're leaving behind who's going to stop the owl bear, when it comes back or whatever. And it's like, oh, sorry, we got to go stop the big bad.
Right.
Good luck, little Timmy. I hope you avenge your father. We got plates to me. And, you can make that decision, a little heart-wrenching, that they can't do all the things. You can do cool stuff with little villains.
Yeah, and I think from the stories that I enjoy specifically, all of the in-between things are where a lot of the character growth happens, right? If you're going from big bad to big bad, then you're not getting any character growth. You don't have the side missions where they have to make the difficult decision. Do we save the little boy or do we go kill the thing? I mean, that's where a lot of the character growth happens. That's where a lot of you can put in specific to their backstory stuff, right? You can. Yeah. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
You're over there. I was agreeing with you. I wish I would have thought of saying that. Keep your words going. I like your words. Keep them wordy.
Yeah. Well, it's the thing that comes to my mind specifically on the story is like season 8 Game of Thrones. You just go from plot point to plot point, and it's not fun. You don't know why the craziness happens. It's kind of nuts, right? Like they're this way, and then they're this way, and it doesn't make sense. But in the previous seasons, you have all of this backstory. They're traveling on the road. The thing happens, right? They get to make the decisions. They get to grow their character. They get to be more invested in what they're doing, and I think that's important.
Well, what you really said that I was excited about, that I want to double down on, is it gives you the opportunity to tell specific characters antagonists, that we can take a little bit of a break from the big villain, so we can have a little story about somebody's specific person from their family or backstory or history or whatever, that we don't want to do. Again, we don't want to do the whole campaign because it's their thing and it's their spotlight moment, but you need to move on past that. But it's so great for like a little 1, 2, 3 adventure arc in there to give them this really cool story before getting back to the big villain. Give everyone their moment of like, oh, but this is your antagonist, and we're going to really make this story something that your character gives a shit about.
Indeed.
Yes, that. So
good
job,
Kate. And then the rest of the players get to decide whether they want to help or not, right? Like,
right. Or be like, yeah, man, your wicked stepmother's actually got a point. So, yeah,
also, she's kind of hot.
Yeah, we actually sold your character, so sorry. You're playing your wicked stepmother now. She's joining the party. You're gonna play her. Finally got rid of this awful character that we hated. No.
Oh man! All right, so we got some questions from the chat. From earlier in the chat, we had Stainless Steel Devil Rat said, "What are your guys' thoughts on body snatching in RPGs?" Or having someone replaced as a doppelganger or some sort of infiltrator in the group, but still maybe have the person play the doppelganger part. Have you guys ever entertained that or did something like that?
That's a really sus question there, Stainless Steel Devil Rat. Go ahead. While you're going to say something, and then I was like just telling jokes. So.
Oh no. I was going to say, the most important thing about any sort of body snatching thing to me is that, and it's one of my golden rules of game mastery anyway, is never take away player agency if you can. Like railroading people to a degree is fine, whatever, but it sucks to play a game and then be told, oh, you have to do X, Y, and Z because you've been mind controlled or dominated or whatever the hell. And that sucks. It's not fun to not get to choose. The whole point of playing these games is we get to choose what these characters do. That's what makes them cool. So if you want to do that, because it's cool, having a doppelganger sneak in or infiltrate the party, that's awesome. But work with the player to do that. Be like, this is going to be this interesting plot point that's coming up. How do you feel about playing that thing? And if they're like, I think most players would be like, I get to be the evil dick that screws over the rest of the party and I don't even have to feel guilty about it. Where do I sign to do this thing?
Yes.
I think most people will be on board, and then you let them still make cool decisions and have fun and have agency. You know, you set up some parameters for how it's going to work. But that's crazy fun. We just did a Cthulhu adventure where one of my characters, she cast a spell against her better judgment and came in contact with extra dimensional entities that switched bodies with her. So she got to spend several sessions as this crazy thing from beyond time and space occupying her body, and it was hilarious. She got to have fun. Awesome. She got to be weird. She did crazy things all the time. And that's way more fun than me just being like, oh, sorry, this thing's in control of your body, so it does X, Y, and Z. It's like, I'm like, this is what your crazy entity kind of thinks. This is sort of its weird motivations. But go nuts, be weird. And I just let her do that. And that made it crazy fun because she got to own it. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, eventually it comes back and she gets her character back and we get to move on. It's cool. But yeah, that kind of stuff is fun. But don't steal agency from the players. They will probably meet you more than halfway, especially as soon as you say you'll get to dick your friends. It's like, oh, yes, I am waiting.
And I think that even goes with like shorter term stuff. So, and again, we got to rely on maturity of the people at the table and what have you. But like a literal mind control spell that only lasts a minute, and then you know it's hey, go and you know, you kill your friends, right? Like, don't necessarily say, okay, well, you're just gonna attack and roll for them. Like, let them play that out. So then maybe even if they want to like take a round to like say, my will is fighting it or whatever, let them have that drama. As long as at the end, you know, they do the thing, and then you remind them like, no, you're mind controlled, so you're going to do the thing. But if you give them the opportunity to role play, like what their facial expression is like, or you know how they're going about it, or all those things, just so that they are involved in those things, and involved in that process of telling the story.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I haven't ever done like a full-on doppelganger switch like that. I've done things where somebody took over their body or I'm sorry, not took over their body. They replicated their body, so there were two of a given character there. And I've let them play both the good and the evil or whatever. And I have also played one while they continue to play themselves, and the whole no, I'm the real one, whatever. But I think the shorter term stuff I've done more of that, and even things like your intelligent mounts, the summoned mounts and things like that. As long as the player, like you said, has the maturity and the inclination to actually make it interesting, as opposed to just, well, they do everything I say they do. You know, I don't have to. Your spell doesn't affect me or whatever. As long as they're not doing that and they're actually playing along with it, I'm good with letting them control it, because I think it will be whatever I had in mind. Whatever they're going to do is that much more interesting. By and large. Now, if I do have a situation where I sort of reserve the right to step in and take over again, though, because if I've got a sentient, independent mount, for example, with agency, if the player says, we're going to go do this, and that is something that is antithetical to what the player should be doing, going against alignment as a paladin or something like that, or whatever, then I have the right to say, okay, hang on, this is how the mount responds to that, because the request doesn't match with it's not programming, but it's, you know, the essence of what it is. And so I'll kind of tweak that, right. But by and large, I will let the players do what they want to do.
Thanks you guys for that answer. Yeah, it's kind of hard, but I think the main thing there is making sure everybody is still playing the game and is still a part of it, right? We don't want to take away the fun. That's why we're all here, is to have fun and play the game. Another question from chat. Anyone have any player backlash from having the big bad guy be someone that's been friendly throughout the entire campaign? Have you ever used that in a scenario, or have you ever got, if so, have you maybe the players didn't like that? Maybe they said that kind of sucks.
Not the big bad guy, but an antagonist. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And yes, I've gotten, I guess, what you call backlash, but it was more, oh no, man, no, that's, you know, it was anger, I think, less at me, more at the betrayal or whatever. So even if there was initial anger, I think there was ultimately acceptance as, yeah, I know, that was kind of cool though, but God, that's a bastard, right? That whole, which I think I enjoyed that reaction, so I don't know.
Occasionally, I mean, I think the important part, I think it's happened less to me as I've gotten older and better at telling stories and not just being like, take that, players, like maybe my earlier years. But as long as you're important, that if you do the reveal, the bad guy reveal, the heel turn or whatever, as long as you make it plausible, seed it a little bit, obviously it sucks if it's like it just shows up out of nowhere and it's like, my mom's a monster. What? No, that like there's been nothing and nothing going on. That you might get some backlash, and that's fair. It's not an interesting reveal if there's literally no way they could have seen it coming. That's just soap operas, sort of thing. But I think if you make sure you put in that there's, you seed it in, you see kind of why this happened, or you kind of, there's a hint, an inkling of it coming, then people most be like, oh, we probably should have done something about that, especially if they only see it in retrospect. Oh, then it's real good. If you can seed all that and they don't quite pick up on it, and then when it happens, you're like, remember X, Y, and Z? And they're like, oh, yes. So
run a quick flashback.
Yeah, I was gonna say that would be a good time for a flashback, right?
No,
right.
Well,
yeah.
And in spite of Walter's sort of, I feel like, very judgy response to the thing that I do in terms of I had just said that this is a thing that I do. Like, yeah, back when I was a kid and stupid, I did that. All right, well, but that aside,
hey.
no, I'm just saying, no. But so my players have this tendency to adopt and pick up anything along the way. And so if you walk up to the shadiest urchin in the bar, right? And you basically, there's a big neon sign that says, do not trust this jerk. Right? And they go, no, he's great. We're going to hire him. In fact, we adopt him. We get him a hat. We dress him. I give him a wooden sword. That's on them, right? That is not on me when it turns out that he is a dick. That's...
I agree. Because that's been seeded. They got a villain. They acquired a villain. Yes. And then it's like, what do you do for a living? Oh, I steal from people. Hey, the next morning you wake up and he stole from you. Shocked Pikachu face. What? No.
Yeah.
Yes.
They own that. I'm saying more when I was younger, it would be like, yes, your trusted butler that's been the good guy this whole time. Oh, he backstabbed you because, and that was not healthy. But yeah,
it's finish. Sorry.
Oh, I'm just saying. I think you've definitely, if they're adopting clearly shady NPCs, it's like they have a petard and they have been hoisted by it at that point. So
yeah, it's not like someone's mom that they created who's doting and always gives them gifts, and then you're like, and then you go home and then your mom pulls out a knife and tries to murder you all, and turns out she's a wizard. Yeah, that's and you know what, that's everything. Almost, that's for all reveals. That's for any situation where someone comes in and is saved, or is suddenly has a power, or like, you really do want to seed that stuff. You don't want anything to be sort of like, all right, we got him. Oh, turns out he has a pet dragon that saves him, and you're like, but why? And that happens. There's a lot of that in various stories, and when you see that happening, it because you feel that. You're like, you feel cheated. You feel cheated out of what should have happened. And so I think if people do have an actual backlash to that happening as a player, it's because it wasn't properly seeded.
Douche ex machina. That's what you should avoid. Sorry, I just right.
Douche
ex machina.
Wow, I never heard it that way.
No, neither did
Douche
I.
ex
I think I
machina.
made it up. But anyway, that's.
Well, it's that you can. You got to make a sticker of that or something.
Yeah, that's like the third thing we need to copyright. Is somebody recording this, writing it down for us? That we lose track of those copyrights.
Yep.
I have not been.
Oh.
No, but we can go back.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, there's got to be seeds. There's got to be some distrust by someone, right? I mean, you can't just big bad or antagonist. Oh, this guy's the thing. It has to make sense. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, or even more than distrust, a valid concern, like that, right. See that things that you're doing are angering this person, or that they're getting upset, or that things have been happening. Maybe you saved the day, but you didn't save their loved one, or you managed to rescue the country, but their village burned. See those things, that resentment early, so they can turn on you in a like, oh yeah, they pushed over the edge. That's the straw right there when they do it. But you see building up to it that they've been getting surly, that things have been going badly for them, and now they're pissed at you.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to make sense, and it can't be out of the blue because that's not fun. Yeah, it's not fun for anybody, really.
Exactly.
Right.
All right, we're kind of wrapping up here, winding down. Any other questions in the chat? Oh yeah, exactly. Walter's almost done with the drink.
Gotta be about done.
Any other questions in the chat? Post them real quick. We'll see if we can answer them. One question, last one we have here. People often talk about great moments in gaming as if they were like stunning successes. Oh, I planned this thing and it went off without a hitch. Everyone went according to plan. I planned it. It was awesome. But really, a lot of them are actually failures, and a lot of things that people remember were like, man, this really went bad for us. What is your favorite big fail? Like maybe the big bad guy fail, or maybe a giant moment of, oh, yikes, that did not go as planned for the big bad guy. What do you guys think about that?
So I'm going to try to do this with as few spoilers as possible, because it's the Masks of Nyarlathotep adventure, and it's a famous adventure, and there's cool stuff. But I always joke that my players are about 50-50, that half the sessions they're just fucking cool detectives, right? And then the other half of the time they're like, time to kick down doors and shoot guys in the face, and you're like, what are you doing? Where was the investigating? And they're like, we're not into it this week. It's weird. But and I don't know
tentacles in there.
I don't know why they're so strangely like they can only tolerate it for so much, and then it's like, no, it's time to anyway. But in one of the most recent sessions, we had this whole thing, and they're at the new location, and they're going to learn about all these people, and it's a big deal. And then by the end of it, they have stolen a boat, and everyone knows who they are. And they've stolen like this major absurd MacGuffin that's absurdly dangerous for them, and they've angered everyone, and just shit's on fire. And it's awesome. They just completely, it's terrible, and they're having to make these new plans, and it's all seat of their pants, because nothing's gone right, and they're just and it's just they're getting themselves deeper and deeper into nonsense as it goes on, and it's glorious. It's wonderful. And the session before, in the last location, they wrapped it up with like a little bow on top, and they did perfect, and everything was great. And this one, they're just like, well, that was really hard last session, so we should probably just, I don't know, let's steal this guy's shit and see what goes on. And it's been great. It's been a hilarious session. They're going to talk about it for ages, even though I do not know how many of them are going to survive this. And I kind of told them last session, it's like, man, you all have backup characters, right? Because what the hell? What is going on here?
You're not saying, but you're saying you might need a character.
But I'm saying it will speed up the next game time if they have them rocked and loaded. So I just want to be ready to jump them in. So
no, I think that spectacular failures are far more memorable than our spectacular successes. I believe that the people very seldom, do at least the gamers that I hang out with sit around and go, yeah, you remember that time that we totally kicked Orcus's ass or whatever? That's not what people say. It was, oh my god, do you remember the time that Jim could not fucking make a save to save his life, right? And then everything, and here's all the terrible things that happened as a result. So, I was in this game, this was, I think that it was Mike Howard. If any of you know who that is, Michael Howard was running it, and it was an Underdark campaign. And we were down in the Underdark. It was a whole party of us, and we must have been 6 to 10 sessions into this game. It was long enough that we were invested in our characters, really loved everybody, it was all cool. And, we walked through this thing, and one of the characters, Tobe, again, if you guys know who that is, Tobe Tennyson was there, and he looked behind, he was playing a halfling thief, and he looked behind this curtain, and unbeknownst to us, he saw this rune, which made him crazy, and anyway, long story short, we all ended up in a line, and he went through, and he murdered all of us, one after another. He just snuck it behind us, and he totally, like, every single one of his hits he made, he murdered every single member of the party, one after the other, just going straight up the line. Right? And we all turned and looked at him, and when all was said and done, because we just kept getting these notes saying, you're dead now, right? And we're like, what is happening? And then we all turn to Tobe. We're like, what the hell, man? What did you kill us for? He's like, no. I didn't kill you. The fish people killed you because they're the one who put the rune up on the wall, right? And so I think this was supposed to be this big fight leading into the thing. We were all supposed to come out victorious, and the campaign just died right there, and we had to start over because all of us to a man perished. Yeah.
I agree that you tend to remember the way things went awry a lot more, and I think that's because things go awry a lot more.
Right.
I think that when there are moments of success, but it's basically when it's that Hail Mary. It's that like, oh man, I've got to hit a 20 on this for us to have any chance. And then you roll and boom, it's that 20, and the whole table just goes nuts because you just did the thing that no one thought you could do. And so those are very memorable. The places where like things just went really wrong. Same campaign with the Strahd one where we had defeated Strahd. Like I said, the GM was new, kind of like learning how to manage encounters. So I think it was our next encounter. He introduced a pair of Death Knights. Like who is it? The one from Kryn, the Death Knight, like basically that, but without names, right? Like the Knight of the Rose, and of course they're like CR 12, and they're just, and we're like level 5. Lord Soth.
Oh.
So it's 2 Lord Soths basically, and we're level 5. And he just kind of brings them in for this encounter. We just kicked Strahd's ass like the last session. So yeah, it was totally one of these like complete failures across the board, right? And the only reason it was in a TPK is because of monk speed. Like I ran away. I just ran away. So then I was able to go and retrieve the bodies later and get that fixed. And the campaign.
Get that fixed.
Yeah, just oh hey guys, you're all dead. I think there's a wagon over here. So
Bring out the dead.
Yeah. And so we lived to fight another day.
Ish.
But it was bad. It was quick and it was bad. So yeah, that's and that, I think a lot of these failures when people are learning to be a GM, it can happen a lot. And just we all have those stories. So if you're a new GM and you're trying to learn and like make those mistakes, and it's fine. Just as long as you're like, hey, I'm learning, I'm trying to figure it out, and you're open to the criticism, everything's going to work out well for you. If you TPK your party with some really impossible encounter and you're like, nah, you could have, then there's issues there. But we all had to learn, we all made our mistakes, and so it's that's just the way it goes. Keep trucking,
and hopefully pull something out of it, that either a funny story or a lesson learned or whatever to get in there. So
right, exactly.
Yeah, we all have good stories. They make for the best stories, the catastrophic failures.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that same character got her ass kicked by a broom, and the rest of the players never, ever, ever, ever let that go.
Well, of course not.
And I will say, some of my favorite systems are the ones that kind of build in funny failures. I mean, I love Vampire because Frenzine is funny. It's like, you're at the fancy dinner party and somebody says something super just bitchy to you and you flip out and get angry, and it's like, ha ha ha, oh, this is going to be awful. And it's delightful. Or like Cthulhu, failing sanity rolls is great, because that's when everything goes to hell, because you failed a sanity roll. It's never fun to make a sanity roll. It's fun to fail sanity rolls, because then you get to go bonkers for a little while. It also lets players, do it's like, well, all the things that you kind of wanted to do this whole time, go nuts.
Yeah.
No judgments now. Or failed will saves. No one wants to fail a con save because they just suck, but failed will saves are just hilarity waiting to happen. So
Indeed.
Yeah, especially when you get to rewrite backstory stuff in Call of Cthulhu. Oh boy.
Right.
Question from Stainless Steel Devil. Danny, I don't know if you saw it, but I'm going to read it for everybody. What tips do you have for running villains that are cooperatively shared with the players? So like kids on bikes kind of deal.
Okay, so there's different styles of role-playing games, we all know, as GMs. So there's definitely like very rule-centric, mechanics-heavy games, and then there's mechanics-light games. And a lot of these mechanics-light games really rely on strong narrative and a lot of times on shared narrative. So I just played a game yesterday, 13 Candles. I recommend you check it out. Geek and Sundry has like a 10-episode show of it. They're all one-offs, but there's an overarching arc in that one, in which it's not like the game master is just dictating what happens and you respond. It's really a narrative storytelling and the way they worked it. And the point of that one is everyone dies by the end. You're all going to die. So it's about how you die and how you get there. So I have traditionally had problems with this sort of narrative storytelling, right? You as a GM and a storyteller, I have this idea of what's going on. And so like, if I pass things to players for them to then start just kind of building and developing other things that are happening in the moment, it's more than just, oh, there's that goblin that has nothing to do with anything, but we're super interested in it now. It's like now they're introducing weird things for them to like obsess over now. And a lot of times contrary to what you're trying to put in, and that can really derail you, especially if your prep is really focused on certain areas. So in the question he's asking, very much we were at a school, we had detention, and so the series of events was supposed to kind of be centered around this detention, maybe a breakfast club kind of thing. And my character was offended by the authority figure in this case and left detention. And when someone said, "You can't just leave detention," my character responded with, "It's not jail. Like, like I'm leaving." And so we left. And suddenly that kind of derailed what was going to happen there. And so to me, it's where I've kind of come to it and learn in playing that game, in playing this game yesterday, is you really do have to trust, and you have to, like, you all have to be in on developing the story together, and you have to be ready. And and sometimes that will mean like, hey, I got to give you a little bit more of what I'm planning so that you guys can maybe work that into the story as well. Or you really have to be ready to just go with the flow. And having that idea of what's happening in the world more so than just what's happening in your specific scenario you want to present really helps with that. It really does. So like, what's happening is happening regardless of whether we're in detention or not in detention. And what we discover is really going to be dependent on what's available to discover in the locations we go to. So yeah.
So I think for me, one of the important things to remember is the difference between the villain and the antagonist, right? I mentioned my use of factions earlier. Each one of my players was sort of given not control of, but influence over a faction in the town. So the paladin works very closely with the church and the church's interests. And I've got this barbarian who works very closely with this group of dwarves. I've got another barbarian who works very closely with this group of orcs in this town, and so forth, right? So each character kind of has a little faction that they deal with. And the result has been that I have thrown things that happen into the story, and the things that they themselves as players do that they've done to this town that they're treating as their home base. I come to them and say, all right, so the church has come to you, Paladin, with this thing that's happened. What do you counsel them to do? And they end up working a little bit at odds with each other and creating more problems for themselves as well as solutions for themselves, because I give them a little bit of agency with respect to these different groups who have differing needs and differing opinions and conflicting ideas. So I think that is what works for me from an antagonist standpoint, is that I'm letting them do things that are not always in parity with everybody else at the table.
Right.
Absolutely. Guys, I think it's about time to wrap up. Thank you guys so much for all of the info and all of the stories and all of the fun this evening. We are going to be back in, I think, 2 weeks, right, Laura? And in the chat or on our social media or anything, please let us know what you'd like us to talk about. If there's anything specific, if there's any topics or play styles or anything you want us to talk about here on the GM Zone of Truth, let us know, and we will try and cover those topics as the weeks goes on. We're going to be here having fun and just chatting about role playing games and how to run them well, and how to have fun with them. So, guys, thanks again. We're going to wrap up for the evening, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.